Hi everyone and welcome back. Quick little Horus Heresy World Eaters painting video for you today. So let's get straight into it. So yeah, as you can see, I've done a little conversion using the Mark II Centurion from the Saturnine box. Just kind of combined that with some World Eater parts and I think some parts from the Endred Har model, just to come up with like a cool looking Centurion. So I'm starting off with a grey primer. You could use a black or any kind of dark colour. A brown would work quite well as well. This just happened to be what I had under the desk, so I started off with this just to give a nice even kind of primer coat. For all of the airbrushing in this video, I'm going to be using the Iwata Eclipse HPCS, which I think has a 0.35mm nozzle. I'm going to start off with some white ink, and I'm just going to apply a general kind of zenithal pre-shade over the whole model. And we're going to be going for a kind of like an off-white kind of colour for the armour on this guy. So I'm going to be using Birch by scale 75, and I'm just going to kind of give it a general kind of base coat. You can't really see it on the video here, my apologies, because the lights on the airbrush station are so bright, but that pre-shade that we applied before this using the white ink just means that the colours on the upper parts of the armour appear brighter. And then we're just going to reinforce the shadows with some burnt umber ink. So I'm just going to do almost like a reverse kind of zenithal highlight with this, just spraying from underneath, just to reinforce those shadows. And once that's done, I'm just going to move on to some Birch by Scale Colour. And this is just going to be, sorry, it's not Birch, is it? It's Nakar. And this is just going to be the general kind of highlight. So just hitting the kind of the upper kind of portions of the armor. And then once that's done, I'm going to move on to a final highlight of White Sands, again by Scale Color. And just hit the very kind of upper areas. So just being a bit more precise with this final kind of highlight. And as you can see, or not see because the lights are so bright, I do apologise. It will get better in a moment once we switch away from the airbrush station across to the desk. Moving on to the blue, I'm going to use the 3 scale colour blues that you just saw on the screen there. So starting with Abyssal Blue, I'm just going to give the blue kind of parts a general base coat. And then going to move on to Caspian Blue for the first highlight. And this is going to cover most of the previous colour. And then after that, we're going to move on to Bearing Blue, again from Scale Colour, and that's going to be the final highlight. So just hit the upper areas with that particular colour. If you don't have these particular paints, or if you wanted to go for like a slightly brighter white or a more kind of saturated blue, you could use this method using kind of any paints. So don't worry too much if you haven't got these specific ones. But as you can see, it's given a nice kind of off-white to the main armor, and then a nice kind of what I was trying to go for was like a desaturated kind of almost like a dull blue. I didn't want this guy to look kind of too bright, so I wanted to kind of go for that kind of Grimdark look, but still using the kind of like the classic blue and white colors. So yeah, I think it works, but let me know what you think. So yeah, just so that we can get the kind of the model into one piece, I'm just gluing those separate parts together. I've kept the head separate just for now. I'll glue that on in a later stage. But yeah, we're going to start with some base coats. So for all of the black areas, I'm going to go for Black Legion contrast. Just find that this kind of works, especially over light colors, like for example what we've got here. I find it works kind of better than a regular black paint, to be honest. So yeah, I've just going over all of the kind of the black weapon parts, like any kind of soft armor sections, and anything like that. Once that's done, I'm going to move on to some wildwood contrast, and I'm going to base coat any brown areas, so any kind of leather, any straps, anything like that. Just give it a nice coat of the wildwood contrast. And I'm also going to give the base a base coat with this as well. And then going to use some Guilliman Flesh contrast paint just to give the face a base coat to work from later on. And then going to use some Rhinox hide, any dark brown will do, and I'm just going to add some chipping to the base. There's plenty of methods that you can use for doing this. Because I'm just painting a single model, I decided to just do it with the brush. If I was painting an army with this method, I'd probably do it with a sponge just for the speed. But yeah, because I was only doing one model, I did it with the brush. And just kind of, chip away at kind of like the edges and any areas that would get kind of like a high level of wear. This guy's got some kind of like holes in his shoulder pads where there's like some battle damage. So I'm just filling those areas in with this as well. And yeah, just add some kind of chipping wherever you would expect kind of like a high level of damage to be. And then just going to use some corn red just to base coat the Legion symbol on his shoulder pad. After that, you'll see me applying some decals. I'd recommend doing this before you do the chipping. I forgot, so I'm doing it afterwards. I also realised I didn't have any World Eaters decals, so I had to steal the 10 from the Sons of Horus and the 2 from the Imperial Fists and combine them together to make a 12 for the World Eaters. I'm then going to move on to some decayed metal from Scale Colour. I'm just going to base coat all of the trim. I'm going to be going for like an aged kind of like brass for the trim on this one. I also didn't realize until I started this quite how much trim there is on this model. So this took quite a while, longer than I expected. But yeah, just give a nice neat base coat just over kind of any trim areas. If you're painting like Mark 6 or something like that, you won't have to do hardly any of this. Next up, I'm going to use some black metal, again from Scale Colour. Apologies, the label on the paint there is completely worn out, so you can't actually read it, but it's called black metal. But any kind of dark silver colour will do. So just base coat all of the silver areas on the model. Realised I missed a bit of the brass trim here, so I'm just going back in with the decayed metal just to get that bit base coated. I'm then going to add a edge highlight to the white armor. So you could use any white for this. I had Purity White from Scale Color to hand, so I decided to use that. But yeah, any kind of white or even like an off-white would do. And yeah, just go around kind of any edges that you want to stand out and highlight. So and I also kind of picked out kind of some of the chips that we did earlier with the Rhinox hide, just kind of highlighted around some of those just to make them stand out a bit. And once that's done, I'm just going to do the same but on the blue sections, and I'm going to use Citadel Fenrisian Grey for this. And yeah, just hit all of those edges, highlight kind of any of those chips that you want to stand out. You don't need to do all of them. I think I did do most of them, but you can just do the ones that are kind of most prominent if you want to. Depends how much time you want to put into it. Also, you could just skip this step entirely if you wanted to, and also the previous step where I highlighted the white. Not entirely necessary. For example, if you just want to get an army on the table, you could absolutely skip this step and it would still look perfectly fine. I just think it does help, especially on characters. Does help them to stand out a little bit more. Next up, I think I just highlighted the symbol on his shoulder pad using Wild Rider Red, just to make that stand out a little bit. And then going to take some Dawnstone from Citadel. You could use any kind of medium kind of grey that you've got. And I'm just going to highlight, because this axe is kind of like a big kind of like flat area. I think it used to have like a chaos symbol on it, which I kind of scraped away, but it's kind of like a big kind of flat area. So I didn't just want to leave it as like a flat black. I want it to have some kind of gradient to it. So what I've done is I've just put some of that Dawnstone kind of along the bottom, just where I thought the light would catch it. And then whilst it's still wet, just kind of feathered it into the black base coat that was already there, just kind of using water kind of on the end of the brush. And then I'm just going over that, I think, with some black Templar contrast, which is thinned quite heavily. And that's just acting as like a glaze, just to kind of like blend that into the previous black base coat. I'm then just going to add some texture paint to the base. I am going to be quite lazy with this because there's some like tank debris on his base, which I really can't be bothered to paint. So I've covered most of that with the texture paint, just leaving like a little bit of it exposed, which is a bit lazy, but hey ho. I'm then going to use some Cadian flesh tone to apply a first highlight to the face. And then going to add some white into that Cadian flesh tone and just kind of give it a general highlight, just kind of like on the upper areas like the nose and the cheekbones, or any kind of like the top of the head, any kind of areas that would catch any light. Apologies for the lack of focus here whilst I'm painting the eyes, but I just did like a couple of thin layers of white on those, and then a black kind of line in the middle just for the pupils. And then I'm just going to use a couple of contrast paints. So Flesh Terror's red, I'm just going to apply into all of the scars and any kind of areas like where the wires from the butcher's nails go into his head, just to make those areas look a bit sore. And then I'm just going to apply some Magos purple into some of the recesses on the face as well, just to give it a bit of variation from the skin tones. And then I'm going to use some Baneblade Brown just to highlight the any of the areas kind of where we base coated it with the Wildwood contrast earlier on, like the leather straps. Just kind of give the edges a highlight and just add a few kind of scratches here and there just to make it look a bit more like leather. And then once that's done, I'm just going to give the model a coat of gloss varnish, which I haven't filmed, but you'll see when I bring the model up here, it will look a bit more glossy than it did before. I've applied it with an airbrush. You could use you can use an aerosol if you like, and that's just in preparation for some oil paints, which are coming up next. I'm then going to take some white spirit. If you're in America, this is probably called mineral spirits, and just mix some of that together with some burnt umber oil paint from Winsor & Newton. To be honest, you could use any kind of brown of your choosing. I decided to go for this one here. And yeah, just mix up a fairly thin wash, but not too thin. You'll kind of see the consistency here when I'm kind of mixing it together, and this is going to be applied pretty much over the whole model. Going to be quite liberal with this, and then we're going to come back in and clean it up in just a moment. I think I did just add a bit of extra paint into that mix there because I think my initial mix was a little bit too thin, but you can kind of see the kind of like the consistency that I'm going for. It's not super thick, but it's kind of thick enough where you can kind of still see the color in the places where it pulls. And yeah, once you've given the model a coat of that kind of all over in all of the recesses, you will want to allow it to dry, or at least for the spirits to evaporate. You can leave it overnight. That'll be plenty. I think I actually used a hairdryer here just on like a low setting, just to kind of accelerate it, just so that I could get on with things. But yeah, I'd recommend leaving it overnight if you can. And then when you come back to it, just use a makeup sponge, or you can use a brush as well if you want to, just with a little bit of white spirit on the end, just to remove that oil paint from any raised areas, and that'll just leave it in the recesses, and it'll just give a really nice kind of effect. It just kind of reinforces the shadows, and just kind of gives the impression of kind of like dirt and stuff like in the crevices. And yeah, as I mentioned, you can use an old paintbrush as well. It's actually easier to get into like the tight areas with a brush, and then just use the sponge for the easier to reach parts. And then just going to take a couple more oil paints. So I'm going to use Flesh Shadow and then the same burnt umber that we used for the oil wash. And I'm just going to put a little kind of dab of this on some of the chips that we placed earlier. And I'm just going to use a combination of both the burnt umber and the Flesh Shadow. The Flesh Shadow is kind of like an orangey color, so it's good for doing rush streaks. And then yeah, as you can see, just put a little kind of blob of it on for now, and then I'll show you in just a second how we turn those into some nice weathering effects. You then want to take some, I was going to say clean white spirit. This isn't clean at all, is it? You can see I've washed my brush in it, but it doesn't really matter. And then, so you want to just take a little bit of that on the brush, and then just kind of in a downwards motion or in whatever direction you choose, like for the effect you want to go for, but mostly here in a downwards motion, just to kind of pull that paint downwards, and it'll just kind of give you like a nice kind of like rust streak coming from some of those chips and some of the like the crevices around the trim and that sort of thing. I'm then going to give the whole model a coat of ultra matte varnish. I think this is the MiG ammo one, but there's a few different ones out there. I think AK do quite a good one as well. I didn't film that, but as you can see there, I've just given that a nice coat with the airbrush. And I've done that purposely before highlighting the metallics. So because if you do the metallics, highlight the metallics and then put your matte varnish on, the matte varnish will completely take the shine out of all of the metals. So matte varnish first and then finish the metallics off afterwards. I'm starting here with some thrash metal from Scale Color. Use any kind of, everyone's got their preferred kind of silver metal colors, haven't they? So use whatever one you like to use. But yeah, this is the main highlight for all of my silver areas. And then for the final highlight on the silver, I'm going to use light metal from MiG, and I just like this one because it's a really bright silver, and I'm not going to go too crazy with this, but just kind of hit the very kind of upper areas of those silver parts. It just makes them kind of pop a little bit, and yeah, as you can see there, it gives a nice little shine to those silver parts. And I'm going to go back to the same decayed metal that we used earlier to base coat all of the trim. It may seem a little counterproductive using the same paint again, but that base coat that we put on earlier has had a brown oil wash over it, and it's also had the matte varnish over it. So it's really dulled it down. So by going over it again with the same paint, it kind of almost acts as like a highlight. And then I'm going to do a final highlight on the brass using Victorian brass from Scale Color, just hitting the edges and kind of like the upper kind of surfaces where the light would catch it the most. And then once that's done, we've got a nice matte effect on the armor, and we've got a nice bit of shine on the metallics. And then this is probably the most fun part of the paint job. So I'm going to take some blood effects and spray. So load it up onto the brush and then use the airbrush to kind of splatter it onto the model, as you can see here. So I'm kind of using a mixture of the standard Blood for the Blood God blood effects paint, and then I've also got some of that mixed with a bit of black, and I'm kind of alternating in between. If you don't have an airbrush, you can do this using, you know, those like compressed air cans that you use for like cleaning your keyboard and that sort of thing. They work really well for this, and it's quite fun. Just make sure you put something down on the desk, because a lot of it will miss the model and it'll end up on your kitchen table. So yeah, be warned. And then what I've just done here is I've just added a bit of water. You can kind of see it on the back of my hand there. I'm just adding some of that just around the areas where I've just splattered the paint onto the model there. And this kind of runs into the recesses a little bit, and I think it just kind of gives like a nice realistic effect. And you can kind of go as heavy or as light with this as you like. It depends how much you want to add. I tried not to go kind of overboard with the blood splatter on this guy, but I think if I was doing an army, which I might do, I'm not sure yet. I'm tempted, I won't lie. But if I was doing an army, I'd probably mix it up. I'd do like a little bit on some of the models and then a lot of it on some of the other ones. But yeah, I think this guy's a good kind of middle ground. And then I think all that's left to do is just to finish the base off. So I'm going to take a couple of pigments. I'm using, I think it's Stand Up Rust and Graveyard Dirt from Absalom 502. Depends how you want to base your model, but I quite like using these as a nice kind of quick basing scheme that looks quite effective. And I'm just kind of so starting with the graveyard dirt, put some of that down, and then with the kind of the rust color, I put a smaller amount of that kind of over the top, almost in like little patches, and then take a larger brush and just kind of blend them together. I'm not going to seal these in. You can use some pigment fixer or some white spirit to kind of seal them in if you want to, but I prefer to leave them unsealed because I think it gives a nice kind of dusty effect. And then just going to add some tufts to the base just to make it look a little bit nicer. I think these ones are called, what are they called? Scorched tuft, I think they're called, from Army Painter. But yeah, as I said, you can base your army however you like. And then after that, I think it's just the black rim to paint on the base, and we are done. And there we have it. I think I'm fairly pleased with this guy. I set out for a kind of like a grimdark, kind of gritty kind of feel, with the desaturated blue and kind of like the off-white kind of dirty looking armor. I think we've achieved that. I think if I was to paint them again, I might go for like a more saturated blue, something with a bit more color to it. But yeah, overall, I think I'm pretty happy. Let me know what you think in the comments. Anything you would do differently, anything you like, those sorts of things. As always, a special thanks to Union County Games in Exeter. If you are ever in the southwest of England, be sure to check them out for all of your hobby supplies. And as always, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.